Good afternoon, everyone. Wishing you a Merry Christmas and a happy and prosperous New Year. On behalf of the Women Members Excellence Committee of ICAI, it is my pleasure to welcome you all to Yashaswini and Idol, Series 42. Yashaswini and Idol is a Wednesday series of programs conducted by the WMEC for the women CAs and by the women CAs. This series is an extension of Sky High Symposium, which concluded its 100 episodes. It is one of the committee's initiatives to not only disseminate information to women members on technical updation and non-technical skills, but also to empower and inspire women members to come at the forefront and realize their verbal skills at public forums. Coming to the last session of this calendar year 2024, it is my privilege to introduce our first speaker for today, CA Sonali Johari, who would be taking the session on startup fundraising strategies across all phases. CA Sonali Johari is a corporate finance expert with nearly 20 years of experience in transaction structuring, valuation, and fundraising. Specializing in health tech, fintech, and insurtech, she provides strategic consulting and training to startups, helping them to solve complex business challenges and drive growth. With this brief intro, let's all welcome CA Sonali Johari. Please take it forward, ma'am.
Thank you, Namrata. Thanks a lot for the warm welcome, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon, and wishing you a very Merry Christmas as we get started on the last session for the year 2024. Let me get started and share my screen. Give me a second, and we should be up and running post that. I hope my screen is visible and all of you can kind of look at it clearly. The topic for today is a very, very interesting one. It's startup fundraising, and we all have been hearing, talking, working on startups as chartered accountants, and hence we believe that this is an interesting topic which should find your curiosity as well as, and everyday basis, we use startups as well as we hear, read, and work on those. So here I am trying to give you a perspective and overview on the key strategies and methods and the phases of fundraising. I'll try to capture various aspects, including some basics around what it means by a fundraising. Some jargons you may be familiar with, some jargons may be new, which we'll try to demystify over the course of next few slides in next 45, 50 odd minutes. At the end of the session, we'll be more than happy to take any questions. So with that note, I'll get started. Startup world is obviously kind of, bundled up, flooded with various jargons we have been hearing. Some of them are related to the field of areas of operations that we have heard, but there are a lot of other ones also. I'm sure all of us have heard about AI, ML, big data strategies. It is very, very important, just as not just as a finance professional, even as a startup founder, even as a chartered accountant, to understand the role of these aspects when we think about fundraising. At a very high level, at a 50,000, 80,000 feet, if one was to look at a funding life cycle for a startup, this is a bird's eye view. What I'll do is I'll try to delve into different stages and what it means, who are the kind of investors, a very bird's eye view on each of these phases individually as well. To start with, usually you'll have revenue, which is lower than, which means negative, you're running losses, which is usually called value of debt, which is the first phase when you need money, which is usually seed capital provided by angels, family offices, friends and family, those kind of people. As you move forward in the journey, and x-axis, please note, is the time, you think about the early stage funding, the mid-stage funding, which is the growth capital, as it is called in the startup world, and a later stage funding, ultimately culminating the journey with a IPO and a public listing. Over the last 3 to 4 years, we have seen an Indian ecosystem also, a lot of startups which have started coming on the public bourses, likes of Nykaa, likes of Zomato, Swiggy, the latest one, Ola, all these are startups which started their journey somewhere around here and over a period of time graduated to become a public listed company in the current avatar which we witness today. So we'll try and talk about all those phases as well. If I was to step back and think about what are the key investor pockets linked back to the stages, it's pre-seed, seed, and series funding. In simple terms, pre-seed actually is basically when companies yet to be operational. It's the initial capital required, not just for admin, regulatory, compliance work of setting up a company, but even to set up a tech team. And most of the startups today have a very strong tech backbone, which is prerequisite business wise. And hence, pre seed capital is the capital which is the initial investment required to get the shop at least up and running, to get into a shape and form that you start the business. Seed, that's usually a modest investment to fund the growth and burn for immediate 9 to 12 months. Again, none of these, we'll talk about the amount as well as tenure over the next few slides, are casting stone. These are basically a very generic in terms of based on the experience in terms of hundreds and thousands of deals which have happened, an indication for you to get a perspective. So you have a pre-seed, you have a seed, and then a series funding. In terms of the timeline, pre-seed, seed, simple, initial funding from founders putting in their own money, family, friends, and angel investors. Normally, a founder, rightly so, if it's a great idea, would not want to dilute. Dilute basically means giving away a part of your equity in lieu of money being raised. The startup funding, you have a pre seed, which is from these guys. Seed is raised to validate the business model and develop the MVP, the minimum viable product pieces. This becomes an extremely important part. There are certain VC investors, venture capital investors, who will think about investing in seed stage uh, or pre-series A stage, also they call it, and you will kind of read about them, you will hear about them, and they typically try to take 10 to 15% stake. It's practically like a bet for them. They're trying. It's a spray and play approach which they adopt. They would not invest in one or two because a typical investment thesis is when you invest in a startup out of 100 people anticipate and expect 30, 40, unfortunately, even up to 50% of them may not survive, may not sustain, which means your investment thesis is backed on the point of conviction, the hunch that, okay, this seems like a good idea, good industry. And I'll also try to capture what builds a good composition of right attributes for a successful starter. And that obviously is also prerequisite looked upon by people for investment. Series A, these are typically the funds used to scale the business and expand operations. This is when business is already, on a scale, if you were to think about it, you've reached from 0 to 1, you're trying to reach from 1 to 10. That's when Series A comes in. B, further growth and expansion, often including international markets, or this can also be new geographic expansion or a product expansion. A company starting with just one product line, after reaching Series A and stability, may think about entering new product lines. Think about, Ola. Ola started with cab bookings, other cab hailing services. Over a period of time, they thought about moving into a EV side, and that's kind of an offshoot which they got into once the original business was established post Series A, Series B. So, if you was to ask me, beyond Series A, the terminology is just there's no casting stone that this is when you will raise Series B, this is when you will raise Series C. It is just a nomenclature used for every next round of funding. You will even hear D, E, F also. I have not very commonly heard beyond Series E or Series F, but again, as I said, it is not a casting stone. It kind of varies from individual to individual situation, how and why and what it is looked upon, right? Then next we get into a Series C or onwards, used to acquire other companies or expand to new product lines. So think about each of these series linked to either a growth plan, a specific product line, some growth trajectory, and a business plan underlying. If I was to sum it up, what types of startup funding are available? There's a bootstrap, which is self-funding. Friends and family, which is, if I'm starting a business, I'll seek help from my close friends. Plus, they also make it's why is it useful for us? Because if I know an individual and I have conviction that that person, he or she, has capability, I would be more than happy to bet my money on that. It's obviously high risk, but as we know the cardinal rule, higher the risk, higher the return. So more earlier the stage of funding you get into, higher is the risk involved potentially in the investment. Some other people, angel investors, now these are high net worth individuals, very, very commonly found in India of late. Most of the family offices will also fall in this category where they want to take a share, a slice in the pie from startups in terms of early stage in when they are early stage itself, because one, it's giving them an option to be a part of the ecosystem. And two, usually the valuations are cheaper than what it would be at a later stage. I'm sure each of us would have heard various anecdotes of startups like Flipkart, like Oyo, like Swiggy, Zomato, where people invested very early stage, took risk, and rightly so, it paid off in form of better returns, great returns. Crowdfunding, well, this is not very common and adopted in India so far. Internationally, in US and all, this is extremely common. They are kind of consumer focused product companies. What they do is once they have a prototype, they put it up for sale and they raise money by selling those prototypes with a clear caveat that these are not approved, these are still kind of a prototype, a sample, and also try to do a friends and family or an angel investor round by a public collation or book building. Government grants and loans, or even incubators in some cases, and you may have heard about the name of various incubators which exist out there, like there's a Y incubator, which is very, very large, known internationally out of US, Silicon Valley. There are a lot of incubators in India as well, and government grants or state grants, the MSE grants, which exist, which is basically for specific purposes. For example, for women entrepreneurs, government has multiple initiatives to launch those. The venture capital comes next, which is the kind of investors and private equities who invest in different series, series A, B, C. Now, remember, not every private equity or venture capital investor will be sector agnostic or series agnostic. They do think about investing at a particular series as their investment objective. So, when they set up firm, they have a clear rationale. We will only invest in companies which are series A or series B, because obviously the valuation changes. There may be another set of investors which think about investing only series C onwards, because in their mind, that's when the hunch of existential crisis or issue has gone away. The sustainability of business is established, regulatory ambiguity is gone, and hence the risk is low, and they are long term investors since then. So, Series C, Series D onwards, typical private activity can be likes of you may have heard about Chris Cap, Warburg Pincus, Temasek, GIC, Bain. List is endless. There are a lot of investors. All these I named about are mostly international, but at the same time, there are equally large and big domestic players as well. However, at one stage, usually it happens at a later stage, an investment thesis can also be backed by a strategic investor. Now, it is very common to see once you've reached a scale, a corporate partnership or strategic investors getting attached, right? Partnering with large corporations or seeking strategic investors becomes a very important mantra from a success perspective. And I'll give you a few examples. I'm sure all of us have been using Blinkit. Blinkit was acquired by Zomato. Now, that was a strategic investment Blinkit founders and investors took from Zomato from scale perspective, from good return perspective. I'll give you another example. ITC recently acquired, or Tata Consumers recently acquired, lot of D2C startup brands of the country. Tata Consumer acquired Cheng Chinese, the entire the company for a good amount for the strategic sense of the business. ITC acquired Yoga Bar, which is a protein bar company actually founded by two sisters. So again, corporate partnerships, strategic investors methods are very, very common. Tata Group has been actively kind of entering the space with their investment in Big Basket. So Big Baskets being a startup took strategic investment and got Tata as their strategic investor. 1MG Pharmaceutical e-health company got an investment from Tata's. So again, in India and outside, just around our arena itself, if you look around, you will find examples in a day-to-day life of each of these types. What is the right type of funding for the startup? And again, that also depends on what side of the table you're sitting on. Are you a founder thinking about the right investment? Then you should think about what is the stage I am. What is it that I'm expecting from the investor? And what is it that is the cost of taking that investment? I always say this to all the people I work with. The color of the money is green, but the qualitative aspects of the investor vary significantly. So while you may not think about it as an outsider a lot about, okay, it doesn't differentiate if it's an investor A versus B versus XYZ. However, if you double click into it, deep dive into it, the nuances and the cost of investment, not just in form of valuation, but in form of certain conditions can make a huge difference. If time permits, I would love to talk about those aspects also towards the end of this session. But before that, let's talk about a typical funding process. For a startup, normally it starts with an idea generation, where you think about the idea, you develop a business plan. Now, this is extremely important. Until a few years back, the startups were not thinking about revenue. There was no revenue thought process that how will you earn revenue. And the whole focus was getting the consumer data, getting the consumers on board, customers on board. And there were investors willing to put in money, bet basis that plan itself. It's always a demand supply. We all have learned that basic economics. We know that what is the right startup valuation is a function of what is the price at which an investor is willing to invest in. It's for anything, not just startup. Even stock markets are demand supply, right? So until a few years back, the focus was on getting customers, getting consumers, getting attraction for business. Take an example of Zomato itself, right? When Zomato started, they never had a delivery fee. They were working on a commission model with the with the restaurants as much as possible. They were earning some revenue, but there was no charge to a consumer. If I'm using a Zomato app, I was not paying anything. Over a period of time, as the consumer's business case, the value proposition has been established, they've slowly and smartly, rightly so, added a fee component to it. You will see that for most of the quick delivery companies, be it Zapto, Blinkit, all these guys, they have started introducing them. So the focus on business plan development is extremely important. It's not just to say what is happening today. It's a kind of, a peek into how do you think the business will evolve over a period of time. Everyone understands that no one can see through future. It's not like a just a crystal ball gazing, and if anyone knew what will happen in future, then we all would have been a multi-billionaire today, right? We would know, okay, what will be the stock price of any valuable metals or anything, and make money out of it. However, the intention is: are you well prepared for the uncertainties and the new eventualities which may come up to you in future? And that's where the business plan becomes extremely important to get a sense of what is the thought process. For seed funding and early stage funding, you talk about successful series funding and the IPO. Let's talk about very few. I'll spend 2 to 3 minutes on each of these fund kind of investors, funding investors, before getting into nuances of how to raise funding. Bootstrap, using personal saving, it's often used in the early stages. There are certain pros and cons of bootstrapping your startup. Maintain full control over the company, no debt or equity dilution, and the ability to make decisions independently. You are not controlled, you're not answerable to anyone. Now, it is good and bad. At early stage, when you have the vision board, you have the passion, no one else can mirror it. You want that flexibility. However, a big consideration is personal finance risk. One should, and we have always learned about hedging our risk, diversification. As a chartered accountant, that's something we be extremely proud of, to say that we have to have a conservative lens to things. There's a school of thought which says that one should not risk their time and money to the same kind of, eventual exposed to the same business. That's what happens when you bootstrap your own startup. So if you have limited resources with which you're obviously trying to, run the business, set up the business, as well as take care of your daily expenses. So when you think about bootstrapping, you should always plan your finances in a manner that you don't want to come to a juncture where you've already put your financial and personal investments into the business. Business still needs more money, maybe a great idea, but unfortunate reality is not all great ideas succeed at same point in time. Amazon and Flipkart have done well, but I'm sure there are 999 others out of 1,000 where one did well, 999 did fail also. And we've heard those stories. So it's important to be careful about what kind of funding works best for you. There is no cookie cutter solution. It varies. It needs to be a tailor-made, customized solution to each approach. Government grants and loans, well, funding purpose, you need to think about it. It's usually a competitive bidding process, and you have to fight for your share in the pie. It's non-dilutive when it's grants. The good part, it's not returnable, which means that you don't owe anything back. Obviously, there may be at times some constraints, like ensuring some social benefit, giving back to society, which is the right ask also. There are a lot of international and Indian organizations apart from government's grants and support which exist for you. The only con there would be, well, there may be certain restrictions in terms of what do's and don'ts and use of funds can be. There may be some, will be some answerability, rightly so. And the typical process of getting this money is a lengthy and cumbersome one. So be prepared for that. Then comes the crowdfunding, which, as I mentioned, not so far being very, very actively sought in India, but internationally is a very active means, especially for consumer product driven companies. A big pros is it can create a buzz. There is a saying in marketing, and I know as finance professionals, we may not work a lot in marketing, but there's a saying which says that every word of marketing is a good marketing. There's no good or bad marketing. Every marketing, every spread of word is good for the brand. Virality is a very important concept in a startup. The chicken and egg situation effectively means a business may be great once it is adopted and used or have many subscribers. But to get many subscribers, you need to have an ecosystem. Take an example of Facebook to start with, or Instagram, or Threads. Now, on Instagram, will you just go and post things if you don't know anyone? None of your friends are. Not really. There is no joy beyond a point, right? You need to know that people are seeing your feed. That's how the social media works. So if I know that hundreds of my knowns are there, I would be happy to go there and kind of, start contributing. If I start contributing, people will see, react, respond, interact with my content, and that may create another trigger for them also to post, and that creates a virtuous growth cycle. However, if there is no other users, and I'm asked that, do you want to be in a social media platform where you're first 100 user? The question will be, does that really make sense? So it's a chicken and egg business conundrum which exists in startups most of the time, which means creating a virality becomes important. And that's where crowdfunding becomes an extremely useful source of funding. The con will requires a large marketing effort. Someone needs to know you exist before being able to decide I want a product or not. And finding the right partner is important. Good news, there are a lot of platforms which have come up where you can just post your product and they take a share in the revenue or commission and you're sorted. So it kind of takes away the pain part of reaching out to people. Good. Again, you'll be interested and curious to know the platforms which exist are themselves also startups. So there's always an opportunity. You need to think about the problem situation, the problem case, and then identify what are the solutions which are possible. Friends and family speaks for itself, very obvious. Pros often low or no interest, flexible terms. However, a big con, it's personal relationships. Again, there can be a lot of heartburns if unfortunately things don't go in the direction, trust issues, which is never a good idea. Never a good outcome if unfortunately things go in that direction. But at the same time, this can be a great option if thinking about medium term funding and people are like minded. Angel investors. Now, this is a very, very, I would say, abused term in Indian context currently because practically all of us have heard about angel investing or Series A, pre Series A investing. Angel is more common. This is basically any high net worth individuals, family offices, people, from a chartered accountant. A lot of CAs also become advisor in such angel investments where they invest in their independent individual avatar and give the seed capital. Angel investors, if I was to map it with the stage of funding, is usually seed or pre-series A investments. More flexible and less formal than venture capital. They would not have any intrusion in day-to-day, no say in business. They will be silent, passive investors. However, obviously there's dilution of ownership, potential for personal investments or interference, and what happens is you make your cap table crowded. A very important element to consider in different stages of funding is what is the name which is coming on your cap table. If, say, an individual is investing in companies and unfortunately that individual's image gets tainted, would that have any negative repercussions on the startup? Second is a logistics hassle. Normally, as angel investor, each investor will be sitting and holding the shares directly of the company and sitting on the cap table, which means every time, and we all know as chartered accountants, there are procedural requirements every time there is a special resolution to be passed. There's a board meeting to be done. There's a shareholder meeting to be done. If you're a board member or a shareholder, accordingly for those resolutions, the approvals will be required. So more the number of people sitting on your cap table, more cumbersome and time consuming and hence complicated the process of getting these approvals. At the same time, this can be funding at more simpler terms because they are not institutional investors. I will say this in the same breath to say also that the angel investors are also getting more and more sophisticated. They usually don't want to be the individual people directly leading the round, but rather be fence sitters. If an institutional is coming, they will say, okay, we're willing. If an institution is investing 10 CR, we are willing to invest another 5 CR, combination of these five people, 1 CR each, at the same terms as institutions. So I'm not saying that kind of, it's all complicated, but yeah, there are shades of gray like everything in life. Then venture capital or even private equity. As I said, these are professional investment firms. We all know private equity. They typically look for startups with scalable business models, and we'll talk about other criteria also that are looked upon when investing. The funding stages, investment investors of these kind have specific view on what stage they want to invest in. Pros of venture capital can gain access to significant funding, industry expertise, mentorship, and strategic connections from venture capitalists. As I said earlier, while the color of the money is green, there are other qualitative aspects which comes along with funding. One of the interesting aspects is the marketing visibility. Think about it. I'm sure, I don't know how many of you read VC Circle, but there are a couple of these kind of, a lot of these services nowadays, Capitaline, VC Circle, Rise and Shine, any of them if you're using, or even ET, Mint, any newspapers. They will have a list of fundraised funds done by our startups, new fundraisers. The fact that you're getting a mention in a leading newspaper, be it Mint, be it Economic Times, saying, oh, startup XYZ raised money from ABC or Alpha Beta Gamma investors, that is in itself creating that marketing vibe. I'm sure you've seen the lot of online television programs which exist nowadays, like Shark Tank, like a lot of other similar ones. One of the biggest thing which people have realized, especially for consumer product-based companies, which got featured in any of these episodes, irrespective of the fact that they may or may not have received funding, they saw a huge spike in volume, in demand, in the traffic flow on their websites, portals, or app after the episode got, you know, uh, episode was seen on the television, and that's because that's the free form of marketing which comes with it. So when you raise money, one of the big criteria you need to think about it. Yes, I'm getting money in the bank, which will be the fuel, the energy for my growth. But what else can I get from this? And that's where the choice comes for venture capital or private equity. Is it giving me branding visibility? Is it getting me into an ecosystem where I can partner with other brands of the same company? There's a business model, Trazio business model, as it was called internationally, which has been very active in India also for a lot of startups. And a lot of companies in India have started operating on that. One of them is Good Glam Group. You may know them by My Glam. I'm giving you these real life examples to be able to relate to them. No other reason, but just to understand the business model. Now, My Glam worked on the entire thesis of buying stakes in companies which individually are doing well. But if I have a stake in each of these companies, together that ecosystem can create a power of 1 plus 1 becoming more than 2. And that's where they were gaining value. They actually bought stake in a lot of content companies and then started buying product companies uh, with an intention that now I have content, which means I have users. I can use these users and push these products to those users and vice versa, right? So when you think about an investor, also think about, is there any qualitative aspect or intangible value or benefit I can get from such investments? If you have a stake in um, a, a mother care brand, which is during the pregnancy phase, and a stake in a child product brand, there's obviously a cross sell potential where you can become a partner in the journey throughout from on the motherhood side. Now, those are some of the things people have thought about, and business models have been established. Becomes important again, how to use that data and information depends on one, which side of the table you are on, and second, hence, based on which side of the table you are on, what is the end objective you're trying to achieve. So pros of venture capital, you can get a lot of benefits. You have like a hotline to mentors, seniors who have been there, done that, been part of journeys for various other startups internationally and in domestically, right? If, say, imagine a startup gets a funding from Sequoia, one, the visibility. Oh, Sequoia has invested. That itself improves the credibility of the startup. Second, Sequoia may have invested in similar startup or P15 as it's called now, internationally. The learnings you can get from them, the people who are founder, you get that connect. It's a huge leverage on the network effect, on the ecosystem, on the business side of things, which is invaluable. The cons, obviously, there are no free lunches. So, an investment from a venture capital usually comes at a very high cost in form of dilution. Typically, a venture capital investor would not look at any stake below 10%, if not 15, right? Second, if they've invested, they expect return. Their pure reason of investment, unlike friends and family, unlike founder bootstrap, is money, money, money. Which means when I'm investing, it's always with an anticipation and hope of an expected return, which effectively means they will sit on your head, think about growth, growth, and growth on the business side. And that becomes extremely important. Now, that's not a bad thing. You've done a startup not for charity, right? So it's not a bad thing, but it needs to also sit very well with you in terms of the way of pushing things. So when thinking about a venture capital or private equity, be very careful. Are you getting along with the long-term thought process of the company? Is there a right balance between what you think and what they think? There's no right or wrong. It's a perspective and approach to things. You should be able to have a comfortable, candid, open conversations. Otherwise, it's a recipe of disaster. Not same, but I always say this: getting a funding is like getting into a marriage or getting into a long-term relationship. You need to get along with your partner. If not, it's a recipe for disaster. Like any relationship, it should be a two-way communication. It should be an open communication. There should be transparency, there should be understanding, and there should be an option to agree to disagree at times also. I'll try, as I said earlier, to capture some of the terms also becomes very important and a very critical aspect when raising funds. Unfortunately, a lot of founders mistake, just think about when raising funds as the valuation alone. But believe me, valuation is important, no doubt. How much you're diluting is critical. But that, in my mind, is only 50-60%. Remaining weightage should also be given on what is the kind of control, rights, and obligations you are giving and taking from the raise, right? And the nature of investing. Okay. Then comes the corporate partnership, strategic investors. Everything I spoke about in the earlier slides still continues. Pros, obviously, the resource, the extent of the potential available is much huge. Now you're not required to go for another round of funding every few quarters or years because you are now under the umbrella of a corporate. Think about it when Tata acquired Big Basket. Big Basket knew, okay, for future funding rounds, I have Tata Group's backing, right? So they did another round of funding. 1MG did a rights issue where Tata invested. So you're getting a long-term investor. However, it may involve significant control or making compromises on strategy because a strategic investment will typically be, if not controlled, a significant minority. Mostly it will be majority stake. So again, as I said, there is no right or wrong approach or a view on this is a good investor, this is a bad investor. It's a function of which side of the table you are on and what is the objective you're trying to achieve. And which investor fits that bill most appropriately because it's a long-term commitment. This slide is just a summary I've tried to put together for your reference to think about different rounds, the purpose of each rounds, which are the type of investors. So as I was talking about from founders, friends and family, angel, which is crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, bootstrapping, angel investors, you get to seed VCs, and then B onwards, some private equities will start coming in if you're exceptionally good, hedge funds, and institutional investors. Of course, once you're listed after this, then you will also have retail investors like, Zomato, Swiggy, Nykaa, and so on and so forth. I've given a sense of equity dilution which happens at each round and the kind of risk. Of course, no price for guessing. As you move from top of this table to the bottom of this table, the risk reduces. But it also means that the valuation increases and hence the potential return from an investor's perspective is relatively lower. Again, what is good return varies from investor to investor and the company status around it. With that, I will wrap up the session around the What are the kind of phases? Now let's talk about how to raise investments. I'll spend another 10-15 minutes on that before we open up for questions. So there were three drivers for a successful startup, which typically an investor looks at, is a 3M model, as I call it: management, market, and the business model. Management, who are running the show. No investor, unless it's strategic, which happens much later in the entire spectrum, wants to run the day to day show. More than the startup at an early stage, at a pre Series A and Series A also. The funding is less on business, more on the businessman, more on the founder. Hence, the quality of management makes the huge difference. It has been seen time and again that if you are especially into any, new age startup, you will also face a lot of regulatory hassles. Now, no one can preempt and predict what the regulatory evolution can be, or geopolitical evolution can be, economic side of things can be. However, what an investor takes comfort on is what is the management founder's ability to handle any such VUCA world situation, any such crisis situation. Are they agile enough to change course and find their way? A very good example is actually Ola. If you go back and read about Ola or even Oyo, for example, Oyo actually started as holiday homes. They were really thinking about just setting up the holiday homes, and then over a period of time, they realized just setting up holiday homes won't work, and they got into this partnership of managing the resort or residential, the hotel kind of properties. But a lot of startups you will see, they started with a different business shape and form, and the avatar of those startups changed gradually and significantly also in some cases, purely depending on market reactions, consumer psyche, consumer expectations, regulatory framework, geographical framework, economic framework, and so on and so forth, right? Market, scope of the operating industry. Are you dealing in an industry which does have a potential to grow, or really you're dealing in a very small industry? If there's no use case of that business, then it's a problem. And the model, what are you solving for? Is it a unique proposition? Is it something you're someone else is doing, but the market is so big that there's a potential for more than one person, right? If you go back and see, a very simple and one of the best startup pitches I've seen in my personal experiences, and you can find this, by the way, on a normal Google search, is an Airbnb pitch book. Find that pitch book. It's literally a 12 or 13 slider. Gives a great insight on how you don't need to make 60, 70, 80, 100 pages. It's up to you how simplified, how direct, and how crisp your messaging is. It's a 12 or 13 slider deck, which crisply and nicely tells you what they want to do, what they're doing, what they've achieved, the funding they're looking to raise, where it will take them, and the competition they're facing. Simple. Start to end, including the title slide and the thank you slide, was, if I'm not mistaken, around 13 slides. And one of the best, simplest presentation I can think of. So this becomes important. Now, when you think about preparing for a funding, there are four aspects to it. You need to refine your business model. You need to know what you're solving for and present that in a full-blown business plan in Excel. That becomes extremely important because that's a look in future to say, this is how I envision my business today. Investors also understand. You may think about 100% growth. Realistically, people know, okay, it may not be 100, but does that mean it will be 50, 60, 70 at least? If you're talking about 20% growth, people know, okay, that's the best case. That's the bull case from the founder. So it's a viewpoint. Okay, I'm thinking about adding these new lines of business, so on and so forth. Obviously, build a prototype or MVP if not already done. Developing a complete pitch book. So now this is called the information memorandum, or IM as it is called, which is basically storytelling, packaging the entire story, telling the investor, because there's also reality check in life that, and again, this varies based on who is the investor on the other side. If you're a startup founder and advisor to startup founder, you need to be careful and cognizant of the fact that different geographies have their own perspectives on how to evaluate an opportunity. More so, we all know, we have learned about it. Attention of human span attention is very, very low, which means if you're not catching their eye, if you're not making it interesting, impressive for them in the first 10, 15, 30 minutes of first meeting of yours, you're not doing justice to yourself. So your first meeting, which is with the pitch deck, has to be not just at a high level, but a good level of depth, leaving them curious to know more, telling them at an elevator pitch level what the startup is all about, what the potential is, what your vision is, what you've achieved, how you've achieved, and what you can achieve with the money you're asking for. It has to be a very good storytelling packaging that makes a huge difference, right? So if you ask me, there are three constituents which are important from after an MVP. Making a pitch deck, which is your first intimation, and even a summary of that is form called teaser, which is what you send to your potential investors before your meeting without any confidentiality agreement. Now, that's a teaser can be anywhere between 3-4 pages to 10-15 pages, which is a peak. It's kind of, before the movie, the trailer, which we see, which makes us interesting. You try to pick up the things, parts, and pieces, which will make it interesting for people to ask more, make it hungry to know more, right? Literally like a movie trailer which we see in halls before the movie is released. Intention being create that curiosity for the main movie so that people come back to movie halls to watch the movie. Same way, you create a pitch deck and a teaser, which is very important. The first peek and look into the company. You back it up with a business model which shows what the future will look like. And the third and probably the most important, meaty, critical aspect of preparing for legal and financial due diligence and documentation. Now, what is due diligence? Due diligence is verification by a potential investor for everything and anything you've said, plus a cleanup, a look, kind of check on the financial health of the company from from the perspective of historical numbers, from the perspective of legal documentations, past information. A lot of chartered accountants are actively solicited involved in legal and financial due diligence. And added to it, this last part to the transaction is the financial documentation, which kind of becomes critical because that's where you agree. Sorry, I think my share has stopped. My bad. Okay. Yeah. So legal and financial kind of documentation because that's where you agree with the commercial terms for the transaction beyond valuation alone. So quick peek into refining the business model. Second. Yeah. What is the clear problem, unique solution? Is the business model scalable? You should think about a business model of at least 5 years, 3 to 5 years, I would say, if not longer. And at times, I think beyond 3 years also, frankly speaking, it's an Excel extrapolation, but still investor would like to see 3 to 5 years business model. Anything beyond that, well, people will discount it, but it is a good way of trying to see, okay, what it can look like in future. But important to focus on the immediate, short, and medium term from an investor's perspective. Most important is your revenue model clear? What is your revenue thesis? The linkages to the revenue, how and where you will earn it from. Second aspect becomes important, cost side of things. What is the cost of generating that revenue? You need to be very, very clear about that, right? That becomes the extremely important element. And third and most important, which is what people look at very actively, is what is the cross sell potential? What is the potential of getting that additional incremental margins or returns without really incurring the same cost as what is being expected for the first dollar being spent, right? So that becomes extremely important element. Developing a compelling pitch book, as I said, a lot of examples. Again, it should not be too short that people feel what they've not even given the details, but it should not be so detailed people feel bored reading it, or it doesn't leave any scope for them to ask you any questions. So it's a fine balance between giving enough to keep them excited, to do justice to your business, but leave them curious so that they come back to you with more information and data. And that's a great way of kind of having that ability to express your passion, conviction as a startup founder about the business. But important to highlight problem statements, solution overview. Is it unique? Is it just one of the many, but you have efficiency like a home loan company, right? A home loan is not a new product. But the fact is, the market is so huge that companies have come up into it trying to address and cater to certain niche categories in a more efficient manner. Or just saying simply, market is so big, we will be, I know it's a crowded space, but still the potential for any new incoming player is also huge. And hence we are one of the 100, not unique about it. You don't always have to prove that you are unique in any sense to get the funding involved, right? Market opportunity, very important to highlight. The business model, go-to-market strategy. If you're thinking about entering into new product lines, let's say you set up as a home loan company, but you say down the line, I will start LAP, loan against property. I'll start loan against vehicle financing also. I'll start enterprising financing. You should have a plan at least at a high level to give conviction to investors that yes, this person is not just saying for the heck of saying. They have thought through. He or she knows what they're doing. Transactions and milestones, obviously, a lot of team members involved in a fundraise, um, the projections and the use of funds, right? So those becomes the critical aspects of a pitch deck. Then comes an interesting aspect about negotiating the investment terms. Now, as I said, I personally think valuation is critical, but it should be given 50-60% weightage, and the remaining should be a combination of other things. Equity and ownership, the amount of dilution. Dilution is a term used to say how much equity stake will you give to an investor for the money they are investing. That comes as part of valuation itself, right? So if I simply say my company's valuation is 100 crores and I'm raising 10 crores, right? Or it's 90 crores, let's say, and I'm raising 10 crores. The valuation, the stake of the investor then in the post investment scenario will be 10 out of the total value now becomes 100, 10%. So that's part of the valuation. However, what matters is what are the other terms and conditions you're agreeing to. Allow me to just share one more screen of mine so that I will take you through some of the nuances which I believe are very, very critical and you will find it interesting, right? So these are some of, I hope my screen is visible. It's a Word doc now. These are some of the things which I strongly believe are important when thinking about the startup, the fundraise in a startup. Obviously, valuation, pre-money, that's the value of the company before the investment, and post-money is the value of the company after investment has been made. Again, remember the critical simple fact, the money is valued 1:1. So if my pre-money was 90 in my example, and I raised 10 CR, my post-money valuation simply will be 100 CR. So pre-money is 5, investor is putting in 1 million, post-money becomes 6 million. This is the terminology you will very commonly hear about on the valuation side. Becomes important. This, in a way, kind of takes you to equity dilution. That's the percentage of ownership founders have given up. So if I had 100% ownership in a company, which is valued in my example at 5 million, and I raised 1 million, that means the new incoming investor will have 1 upon 6 as the stake, right? Correct? And I have diluted my stake to that extent from 100 now. 1 upon 6 implies that the new investor will have roughly around 18% stake. 1 divided by 6, yeah, 16-17% stake. So I have taken a dilution of 17%. Instead of 100%, now I have 83% stake in the company. Funding round, the stage of investment that corresponds to the startup growth phase. As I said, the nomenclature at times just indicates how many times have they raised funds in the past. Each funding round has different expectations in terms of traction, company valuation, and investor involvement. Now, one interesting aspect of a fundraise is equity versus debt. Debt is not very common for startups purely because one, you will not see banks investing in debt, providing debt to startups which are still loss making. Banks usually need a security and startups have none. However, you do see something called venture debt in the Indian ecosystem. There are around 3 or 4 very large players who have been providing venture debt to these startups. In equity, common form is common stock, but then preferred or CCPs, compulsorily convertible pref shares, is the usual instrument used for startup funding. Startup funding, you will see CCPS, Series A, Series B CCPS, and so on and so forth. So what is the type of investment? The other element you need to look at when talking about the funding in a startup. Now comes some more technical terms. I will talk about them at a high level for you to get a perspective so that if you're working on similar situation, you should have a familiarity about what this means. Liq pref or liquidation preference as it's together called, LP or liq pref is the common jargon used, simply says that if in an unforeseen situation, company has to go down the liquidation route, who will be paid before what? What will be the hierarchy in which the payment will happen? There can be a participating liq pref versus non-participating, indicating is it a capital guarantee versus in what form will the upside be shared. But negotiations on liq pref are extremely intensive, and I have personally witnessed deals falling through because the founder and the potential investor could not guarantee on or agree on the LICPREF proposition for the investments in question. So LICPREF is simply saying in which order will the investor get paid if a company was undergoing the liquidation, right? Then comes conversion terms. When it's CCPS, of course, if it's equity, that doesn't come. Normally, it's common to for founders to invest through a equity route. And when raising investment from an institutional investor, a VC, a private equity, or anyone else, it will be a CCPS. The terms of this CCPS becomes another important element. You know the amount, of course. Conversion, that comes from the amount. But then it's common to see a bridge round. Now, that's a terminology used when you don't have full-fledged investment. You have more like a mezzanine investing, interim investing, and you say that, okay, I'm going to raise a bigger round in 6 months later. That is the price discovery. Why don't you invest today at the price at which the conversion will happen 6 months down the line? Investor will say, I'm taking risk today. The raise may happen or not happen. There's a 6 month gap. The risk for me is higher. And the outcome to that is usually a solution is, okay, if I raise a round in the next 6 months, I'll give you a certain percentage discount. So what is the discount rate? What is the maximum minimum valuation, floor and cap on the valuation? Those things become important as another aspect, conversion terms. Vesting. Now, this is basically when you're giving employees ESOP. And I'm sure all of you have heard about ESOPs because that's the biggest wealth generator for most of these startup employees over the last 1 decade in the country. What is the vesting schedule? When, how, where, in what shape or form does the vesting happens becomes extremely important, not just for employees, but even the founder shares. If you're giving shares to founders also at a later stage, purely to keep them involved, motivated, and have their skin in the game, what is the schedule of that vesting becomes extremely important as a round of funding. No prize for guessing, board of directors and governance. Basically, are you giving board seat or not? If you're giving board seat, there's something called affirmative voting matters, AVMs, or reserve matters, RM, or protective provisions. Lot of terminology. What it means, normally investors will have a veto right in simple terms on certain decisions. If you're thinking about filing for bankruptcy, you need an affirmative vote. If you're thinking about filing any CXO, you need an affirmative vote. If you're thinking about changing an auditor, that's a material event again. If you're thinking about selling the company, merging the company, acquiring, in some cases, and the list is not exhaustive. It's not a casting stone list. It depends on situation to situation, right? A strategic may have a very different perspective versus private equity versus an angel investor. You may not give any AVMs to angel investor, but strategic private equity VC will have AVMs. There's usually a restriction on what kind of lending you can take as a company, what are the kind of related party transactions you can enter it, and so on and so forth. But important element of the transaction documentation. Then there are anti-dilution protection, which effectively simply says, tomorrow, if company raises funds at a valuation lower than the amount of valuation at which you're investing today, how will my interest be safeguarded? I invested in a company today, when it was 5 million, post money 6 million. But tomorrow company is really not doing well, desperate to raise funds and raises at 3 million. Someone else investing lesser than me in absolute terms may end up having more percentage stake, which is what I don't want. So there are various ways of addressing that also. But remember, transaction documents are always thought and drafted considering worst case can happen, whatever worst outcome can happen. Intention is if really things were to go southwards and things were to go bad, what is it that will be important for us as an investor? That's how they think about it, to safeguard our investment. Now, how strong those provisions are will depend on how desperate an investor or a founder is. Basically, it means who is in a more stronger position. If it's a startup which has great investors already lining up, they will say, I don't care about you. I don't care about you and your money. I have other investors willing to invest at same valuation but not asking for any of these. Versus a startup which is desperate, needs money, not have many investors, and an investor knows I'm the only one in the play. They will obviously arm twist and ask for rights. Now, again, there's no right or wrong in this. Like everything in life, it's more of a demand supply. It's more of a commercial negotiations and what works for one versus works for others. Last few months before I end the session, Exit strategy, normally almost always, especially institutional PE, VCs, these guys will have a provision in the agreements which says, and it's kind of a good gentleman's promise kind of thing, that you will think about providing us an exit because I'm not investing for charity. Listen, I'm here investing in anticipation of return, which means after a certain period, now this can be 4, 5, 6 years, almost always I've seen with every round of funding, Series A may have agreed for a 5 years later. And a year later, you did Series B, and then you roll forward by another 1 year, and so on and so forth. It's a mutually agreed timeline. However, in very few cases, in recent times when the markets have changed and the demand and the valuations for some of these startups is not as good as what it used to be back in the days, I have seen people trying to use this provision. So important, depending on again which side of the table you are on, to negotiate and finalize this term in the best interest of yourself or your client, right? Drag along, tag along. These are some other, very important provisions which are agreed in the documentation. It simply means if an investor is selling their stake and they need promoter also to sell, purely because that creates a minimum percentage stakeholder for a strategic, they can drag along. Allows major shareholders to force minority to sell in the event of a sale. Tag along allows minority shareholders to sell alongside the majority. So you can also have a tag along with founders. If founders were to decide to sell, they will have to mandatorily give a tag along to investors. Again, how they are drafted depends varies from situation to situation. Tranches and milestone, this again varies. There are certain rounds of funding you may have seen where an ITC Yoga Bar is another example, all in public domain. Everything I've spoken about today is all in public domain. If you're curious about anything, just Google it, and thankfully, the power of internet, we will get information. ITC decided to invest in two stages. So there was a tranche one, which was, I think, invested in Jan 2023, and a second tranche, I think, comes in early 25. But the whole point being the milestones were pre-agreed. If you hit this valuation, this revenue, or this valuation, whatever those milestones are, this funding will come in. Pro rata right, that's again a right to the existing investors to participate in future rounds of funding. Um, this is also given under Companies Act for equity holders in the Indian Companies Act, and the founders' rights and restrictions in use of funds. These are some of the common terms which agrees. This is not an exhaustive list, but the intention for me sharing these was to give you a flavor of what kind of terms are required to be agreed across different rounds of funding, right? It's not an exhaustive list, as I said earlier, and there can be some of these, if not all of these, which exist in terms of the terms being agreed for the entire transaction, right? With that, let me take a pause, and I'll be more than happy to take any questions which may come up. I hope this was useful. Over to you for any questions.
Hello everyone, Merry Christmas. CA Kajol here. I'm also here in case of any questions. Actually, the session was so insightful. So I think, and you have discussed all the minute even terms in so detail. So it's just that one of the participant is asking whether we can share this PPT online.
Okay, I'll check with the team on that one and get back to you. Thank you, Kajal.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
That's it from question side. No other questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I hope this was useful and all of you guys enjoyed it. There's another very interesting session ahead. So
yeah, so I would like to thank you, CA Sonali ji, on behalf of Women Members Excellence Committee for such an insightful session on fundraising, startup fundraising, and it was really very useful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes. Now I would like to further hand over to CA Francesco Toscano to carry forward the session.
Thank you, Kajal.
Thank you.
I would Merry Christmas to everybody, and I would like to introduce our next speaker for this evening. That is CA Hetal Devani. She is a chartered accountant with an expertise in audit of listed entities, internal financial controls, and statutory and tax audits. She presently holds a DISA qualification and is actively contributing to the various initiatives at our institute. we welcome you, CA Hetal Devani.
Uh, Thank you, Radhika. And good afternoon, all the members presented over here virtually. And thank you so much, the Women Member Excellence Committee, for providing this knowledge sharing platform that is called Yashashwini. And it's been really great pleasure to be a part of this knowledge sharing session activity. So today, my topic is rational and significance and the process of the peer review. So just let me share the screen first. So today's topic is on rational significance and the process of the peer review. As you all are getting might be well versed with this word peer review from last 1 or 2 years very well, as we all get to know that the applicability of the peer review get more and more exhausted day by day, and with these it is very important concept for the practicing chartered accountant to know about the peer review, especially when the applicability has been emphasized to your criteria of the firm, and you need to get peer reviewed for getting the for undertaking the various assignments which is required to get done peer review before undertaking the assignments. So today we are going to discuss the few concepts of the peer review, which is containing of the concept of the basic term peer review, then rational of the peer review, objectivity, its applicability, then significance of the peer review, then coverage, the process of whole the peer review concept, the peer review report, the AQMM concepts, which is newly introduced in the year 2023, then the eligibility of becoming the peer reviewer, and the obligations of the reviewer who is going to conduct the review process, and the confidentiality concepts which is need to be kept by the reviewer and all the person involved in the whole process, and the revocations of the peer review certificates. So let us begin with the basic understanding of the concept, the peer review. So if we read the word peer review, that means a peer means a person from similar standing. Here the person is going to review the whole process is from the similar standing. That is, the person must be from the practicing chartered accountant, right? And the review, that means the re-examinations or an evaluations of any particular subject matter. Here the examinations and review of the system and the procedure is to be carried out with a view to understand whether the same has been put in place by the practice unit or not, with a view to ensure that whether the quality and the assurance of the services, which is as emphasized as in the technique with respect to technical, professional, and the ethical standards, as defined under the AQMM, wherever applicable, has been duly applied by the member or not. And along with that, if any other regulatory requirement is been prescribed by the council, whether the same has been consistently applied by the practice unit or not, with a view to ensure that the quality of the audit and its related services must have to meet the standards established by the ICAI. So, moving ahead, let us understand the rationale of the peer review. So, basically, the concept of the peer review is being used by all the accountancy body across the world as a tool for enhancing the quality of the services which is being rendered by this professional accountants. So, as our institute has already been striving so hard to formulate the standard statements, various guidelines, not with, we all know that with respect to, we usually every year we are getting the guidelines not on the tax audits, on the statutory audits, on the bank audits, on the concurrent audits, and whatnot. With respect to the industry specific publications or any research study and monograph, whatnot, just to ensure and enhance the sustain the quality of the audit and assurance services provided by its member of the ICI, with a view that the member must have discharged their duty in the most effective and efficient manner so far as the quality of the services has been concerned, and it's been always on the priority list of the institute. And with the passage of time, our institute has recognized this need to observe that the best internal practices across the world has already established that system of peer review. Hence, to be with the par with all that developed countries across the world, so far as the quality of the assurance services is concerned, the institute has established the peer review mechanism, and hence the peer review board has been set up for the compliance of the same in the period in the year 2002 March, right? And afterwards, with a view to cater the need of the professions with the changing environments, the council has brought up with the peer review guidelines year 2022, which is applicable from the October 2022, just to lay down the framework to conduct how to conduct the peer review. What is the process to be conducted by the peer reviewer? What are the reporting has been generated? What are how the review criteria has been? What are the assurance functions has been covered under the peer review process? The whole basic terms has been duly established under this guidelines note issued by the ICI in the year 2022. The peer review board has truly lived up with these visions of the partner in nations by responding it's the expectations of the regulator, various regulator, that is SEBI, CAG, MEF, banking sectors, and the stakeholders and the society in the working towards the improvement of the assurance services with respect of the quality is concerned. And to increase the basis of this reliance placed by the user of these financial statements to make the decisions by the stakeholders and the investors. As we all know, when the quarterly reports has been issued by the uploaded on the SEBI's websites, and we all found the sensitivity of the price movements. And so far as the investors' decisions has been concerned, the basis of the reliance is far more important. Far more important to be considered while preparing the financial statements. And hence, to ensure the better quality and consistency in the audit services across the sections, auditing firms at large, and to ensure the adherence to various statutory and regulatory requirements, the concept of the peer review is more and more of a important. Herewith, let us check the objective. With what objective the peer review has been conducted? The peer review is to be conducted with a view to ensure the quality of the insurance services which is to be conducted and performed by its member. And with a view to assess the whether the engagements are conducted is in accordance with the applicable standards and the regulatory requirement or not, with a view to enhance the public confidence in the financial reporting, with a view to reinforce the credibility of the financial information provided by the company, and to facilitate the continuous improvement, to encourage the culture and quality of the adherence to the best practices amongst the practicing chartered accountants. Here, the main objective of the peer review is only and only to carrying out the assurance service engagements of the member of the institute must have complied with the technical, professional, and ethical standards. These three core fundamentals are the ultimate base of this whole the peer review concept. This is technical, professional, and ethical standard. Wherever you go through the guidelines notes of the peer review and trying to learn the whole peer review process concepts, these three fundamentals are every time you are get to read about, and you must have to go through these three concepts while and kept in mind during performing the peer review process. And having placed the proper system, including the documentations to imply the demonstrate the quality of the assurance services there. First is member must have to comply with the technical, professional, and ethical standards. And secondly, the system of documentations. If the system of documentation is not there, then how you are going to demonstrate the work you have done when the things go wrong, or when the question has been raised by the upon the assurance functions performed by the members. So the compliance as well as the documents, both the things are to be required to be considered, and review of the same has been done by the peer review process. The peer review process is based on the principle of systematic monitoring of the procedure adopted and the record maintained while carrying out the audit and assurance services. The whole peer review process is intended to review the quality control framework and check the proper and consistent applications of such control. Here, if you understand, then you get to know that the review process, review of the quality control framework, that means the compliance part has been defined, and the review of the proper and consistent applications, that is a substantive process, has been considered here with as a part of the peer review process. Here with the reviewer may not that the primary objective of the peer review is just to improve the quality of the services, and do not seek to redefine the scope and authority of the technical, professional, and ethical standards which is already been specified by the council, right? So peer review process make it ample clear that reviewer is not going to sit on the judgment of the practice unit. He is not going to tell that what is right and what is wrong. He just have to ensure that whether the process adopted and the performed by the practice unit is been more precise way with respect to the standard issues by the ICI or not. And if it is not been done by them, then evaluate the procedure followed by the practice unit, and if it is required, then they have to guide them that how they can achieve for more betterment. The PU is if the practice unit is not following the prescribed standards, then reviewer are expected to recommend a measure to improve the procedure to be followed by providing them the appropriate guidance. For example, if you consider that if there is any absence of the planning process of an audit during the review, if you are going to find that the whole planning process has been skipped by the practice unit, then in case you can consider it as a serious deficiency, and in that case you need to remediate the same has been remediated by the practice unit, and in that case you might issue the qualified report also for the same. And in another case, auditor is not carrying out the suppose any physical verification process of any furniture and fixture, then it might not attract the same comment. In that case, you can ask for the further clarifications for the same, and if the same has been satisfied by the reviewer, then they can issue the a clean report for the same, right? So the conclusion here is that to peer review is to seek to identify and address the pattern of non-compliance with respect to the quality control standards. Now let us understand the applicability of the peer review. To which practice unit the whole concept of the peer review has been applicable. So here with the applicability of the peer review is divided into the two parts. The first part is based on the type of assignments which you are going to undertake, and the another part is the based on the type of the firm, that how many numbers of partners you are in the firm. So here the date of applicability has been provided for the phase wise. There are 4 phases of applicability has been defined by the peer review board. So the first phase, where the practice unit has been considered, who is going to undertake the statutory audit of the enterprise whose equity or debt securities are listed in India or abroad. That is in simple way that whoever the practice unit is going to take up the statutory audit of the listed company. So in that case, it is mandatory to hold the valid peer review certificate from the date of the 1st April 2022. In the second phase, they have considered further ahead the practice unit which is going to undertake the statutory audit of the unlisted public companies, which is having the paid capital not less than 500 CR, or the annual turnover not less than 1000 CR, or in aggregate, the outstanding loans, debentures, and the deposits which is not less than 500 CR, as on the date of 31st March of immediately preceding financial year, or the firm which is having a 5 or more partner and rendering the assurance services. In both of the case, the applicability of the peer review is mandate from the 1st July 2024. That is, before taken up this kind of assignments, you must have to hold the valid peer review certificate. And here in the second part, this any firm which is having a 5 or more partner, that means before taking up any of the assurance functions, you must have to hold the peer review certificate from the date of 1st July 2024. In the third phase, it has been considered that the practice unit who is going to undertake the statutory audit of the entity which have raised the fund from the public or a bank or financial institutions over the 50 crores during the period under review, or any body corporates, including trust, which is covered under the public interest entity. In that case, again, the applicability of the peer review has been mandated from the 1st January 2025. And in the second part of the phase 3, there is a firm has been covered who is rendering the attestation services and having a 4 or more partners. Again, the applicability has been mandated from the 1st January 2025. The next is a phase 4, which is mandated from the 1st April 2025, which covers the practice unit who is going to conduct the audit of the branches of the public sector bank. That means whoever the practice units is going to undertake the bank branch audit even get covers under the applicability of the peer review process. And the firm having a 3 or more partner and rendering the assurance services, then the applicability has been same, that is from the 1st April 2025. Now let us understand what is the significance, what is the benefit for having this peer review process. Yeah, so as we get to know in the phase 1 here that it has been mandated by the listed companies to undertake the listed companies assurance. It is mandated to have the peer review certificate. So here the first point has been taken up that SEBI has mandated the statutory requirement whereby the limited review or the statutory audit, not only the statutory, not only the annual audit, but during the limited review, which is quarterly been done, the report has been submitted to the concerned stock exchange by the listed entity has been given only and only by those auditor who hold the valid peer review certificates, right? So here with the SEBI has also required that the reports or the prospectus issued by any corporate entities has to be given only and only by the peer review audit firm. In the first phase, not only the statutory audit reports, but in the case of any prospect, that means that any company is going to form. In that case also, the same has been issued by the only peer reviewed firms. In the case of the multiple empanelment forms, that is MEFL, we all file once a year in the month of September, specifically ask for the details of the peer review certificates. That means the bank audit's eligibility now, it depends on the peer review certificates, whether you hold or not. It depends, and it will affect the allotment of the bank audits also. Further ahead, the third entity, that is the Comptroller and Auditor General of India, CAG, has also recognized that work of the peer review and has decided to allocate the substantial point to the peer reviewed firm for the allotment of the public sector undertakings. And they also mandates that only peer reviewed CA firms will be given the PSU audit of the PSU and the government companies audits. And further ahead, the issuance of these unqualified peer review reports will avoid the disciplinary actions by the ICI in the future. It will lead to the knowledge improvement for both the reviewed firm as well as the reviewer. It will lead to experience sharing between the peer reviewer and the peer reviewed firm. And it may lead to the exchange of the best practices. How? As the practice unit is going to share all the data and all the assurance functions performed by them to the reviewer. and based on that, reviewer also get to know and understand how the things has been done, how the assurance function has been performed. So there is a experience sharing between the both of them has been happened, and it will lead to the best exchange of best practices. And it in some case the peer review brings also the fellow professionals in a close context with each other, and it will also result in the networking and the recognitions of the mutual strength for the further collaborations. Now let us understand what are the assurance functions, what are the process, what are the things has been covered under the whole process of the peer review. So the coverage, the peer review guidelines lay down the coverage of the review to be conducted under as defined here with that once a practice unit is subject to the peer review, it's all the assurance engagement records pertaining to the peer review period shall be subject to examinations and review by the reviewer. So here the term consider peer review period. The peer review period means what? That means the 3 financial year preceding to the year in which the practice unit is selected or has applied, or such other period as may be prescribed by the peer review board in the specific case. Usually it will consider as a 3 financial period for which the whole the review has been done. In that case, during the 3 financial year, here the term 3 financial year need to understand. Suppose in as on date the December 2024, if you are going to apply for the peer review process, then peer review board might intimate to get the peer review done for the 3 financial year, that is end on the 31st March 2024, which is begin from the 1st April 2021 to 31st March 2024. So we have to understand the whatever the assurance functions performed by the practice unit during these 3 financial year. That means for whatever the assurance functions, attestations functions, whatever number of UDN has been generated, we usually generate the UDN for the attestations function perform, where we are going to give the true and fair view and somewhere certified the figures, right? So whatever number of UDN has been generated during 3 particular years, all the assignments are subject to the review. In certain case, the practice units may have one or more branches at a various locations in India. In that case, they may get the peer review of any particular branch, which is conducted by particular any branch peer reviewer. And in that case, reviewer of the head office will consider the report of that branch peer reviewer and shall issue the consolidated report as a whole for the practice unit of the HO. Peer review, it covers what kind of assignments, that is a compliance, what the process or things has been considered, that is compliance with the technical, professional and ethical standards, quality of the reporting, how the quality of the reporting has been prepared, performed, system and procedure for carrying out the assurance services, how the self-evaluations has been done under the AQMM by the practice unit, what is the training program has been conducted for its staff which is concerned with the assurance functions, including the availability of any appropriate infrastructure for reading facilities, library, what are the various seminar has been conducted, and etc. Further, the assurance service, which may be used interchangeably as a audit service and attestations functions or any audit functions of the practice unit. Here with the assurance engagement, which means the express of the conclusion to enhance the degree of confidence of the intended user. But here with the following assignments are not going to be included. That is the management consultancy engagements, representations before various authorities, engagement for the compilations of financial statements, engagement to prepare the tax returns, advising the clients in a taxation matters, that is consulting, engagement of solely to assist the clients in preparing and compiling and collating the informations other than the financial statements, then testifying as an expert witness in front of the ITAT and other authorities, providing the expert opinions on the points of principles, like standards or applicability of certain laws and facts provided by the clients, engagement of the due diligence and any other service rendered or performed by the practitioner and which is not prescribed by the council as a assurance engagement. Now let us understand, these are the basic previous background we have understand, that is what is the rational, what is the objective, what is the term peer review. Now let us understand how the whole peer review process has been conducted, right? So the process of the peer review basically has been initiated in a two ways. First is it is initiated either by ICI or it is initiated voluntarily to comply with the applicability criteria. So in a case where the process has been initiated by ICI, in that case, the peer review board intimate the practice unit about their selection, that your selection has been done to conduct at the peer review. In that case, practice unit submits the form 1 letter on to the peer review board. And where the practice unit itself voluntarily initiate the process, then in that case, it has to submit the questionnaire in a form 1 initially while applying for the peer review process. Later that the peer review board provide the three name of the peer reviewer, and one of which must be selected by the practice unit out of that. And later that when the selections of the reviewer has been done by the practice unit, then it has to intimate and send it to the peer review board. Once the selections has been done by the practice unit of the name of the peer reviewer out of the three provided by the peer review board will intimate to the respected reviewer that your selection has been done to review conduct the review of the so and so practice unit, and along with the details like his selections with the PU details, the documents of the checklist which is required to be submitted at the time of report by the reviewer, then the fees of the peer review is to be paid by the practice unit as per the schedule, the time schedule during the which the peer review process has to be completed, and the sample selections criteria based on which the sample is to be selected by the reviewer for the review. Then afterwards, the reviewer has to intimate the peer review board about his acceptance to the assignment of the assignments. Then later that peer review intimates the practice unit that yes, the peer reviewer has accepted the peer review assignments, and later that declarations of confidentiality is to be submitted by the RE to practice unit, which has been acknowledged by the practice unit, right? Afterwards, the practice unit submit once the declarations of confidentiality has been received, only and only thereafter the practice unit submit the questionnaires in the form 1 to the RE. There are various forms which will describe later in the summarized form, that various form using which the submissions has been done between the practice unit, RE and the peer review board. So here with the practice unit has to submit the questionnaires which has been prescribed in the form 1 to the reviewer. Thereafter, by reviewing that questionnaire form, RE select the sample from that data which is provided in the annexure 1 to that form 1. In the form 1, there is one annexure 1 in which the whole the data of the clients pertaining to that period of 3 years of the review has been provided by the practice unit, out of which the RE will select the sample. Based on what? Based on the sample selection criteria, which is as prescribed by the peer review board. After the selections of the samples, reviewer shall intimate it to the practice unit by using the form 5, in which the date of the visit has been intimated, that kindly kept ready all the data by so and so date, so that we can perform the review for the provided samples, right? After that, the RE may seek any additional information if it is required from the PU in the form number 6. If it is after reviewing the form 1, if the reviewer thinks that the so and so information is required to understand for more betterment, then they can ask it from the practice unit in the form 6, right? Later that RE shall plan to plan the on-site review for verifications of the sample selected and all the procedure followed up by the practice unit, which is as mentioned in the form 1. Then the review of the sample should be complete. Whole the review of the samples and the on-site review has been completed within the 6 working days. Right. So these are the list of forms which is to be laid down under the whole the peer review process. Form 1, as we have understand earlier, that it is applications come questionnaire which is required to be submitted by the practice unit to the board, and letter that the reviewer will receive after the submissions of the declarations of confidentiality, which is again here in the form number 2. Right. Later that form number 3, it's an application come declarations for getting empanelment as a reviewer. If reviewer wants to get after following the due process of the examinations and attending the training, if the any practicing chartered accountant wants to get empaneled as a reviewer, then they have to file this form 3 with the peer review board. This is a form 5, which is to be filed by the reviewer to the practice unit, which is containing the proposed visit date and the sample selected for the review. Then the form 6, it is there, which is required to be filed if any additional clarifications is to be required from the practice unit by the reviewer. Then form 7, the whole process of the peer review, it's been prescribed by the board, which is usually need to provided to be completed within the 20 working days. If any further extension of time it is required, which is to be provided not more than 6 working days, then jointly by the practice unit and reviewer has to apply for the same by filing form 7. In the form 8, which is for the extensions of the validity of the certificates by the practice unit to board, which is not again beyond 6 months. For say if it's any particular assignments is in between, and for say it is about to complete within 3 months, and before that the before 1 month before that, if any certificates been expired, so it's technically been sometimes not possible to apply for the whole peer review process just to cover up for the just to comply with the that particular assignments for the within the period of 3 months, right? So in that case, sometimes board may provide the validity, extend the validity of that certificate, but again, which is not more than 6 months. Then in form 9, which is report by RE, it's is forming part of the final report, which is just a covering letter and containing the payment of fees details. And form 10, it's for the review questions of the certificates by the peer review board, which is to be filed to the practice unit. In certain specified case, there can be happen the revocations of certificate, which has been communicated through the form number 10. Now let us understand how to be peer review report has been prepared by the reviewer. The final report of the peer review is to be submitted by the peer review submitted to the peer review board as per the model final reports format as provided by the peer review board. All the formats which has been given here with has been for the model format has already been provided in the guidelines notes, right? So there are the 3 annexure 1, 2 and 3. The annexure 1 and 2 are required for all the practice units, and the annexure 3 is applicable with effect from the 1st April 2023 along with the applicability of the AQMM. In whatever the case, the AQMM process has been conducted, the annexure 3 has been prepared and submitted for that particular practice unit, and AQMM is applicable to whom? That it is applicable to the practice unit who has conducted the audit of the listed company and the banks other than cooperative banks except multi-cooperative banks, right? And insurance companies, and rest for the rest of the case, it is recommendatory for the other PO. In case of the RE, observe any deficiency in the system or the quality control for the assurance services. Then practice unit for that particular practice unit, a preliminary report has to be issued by addressing the practice unit the observations that has been made and asking for the representations for the observations made by the reviewer. And if the representations received from the practice unit is satisfactory, then in that only case, a reviewer may issue the final reports. And if the representations received from the practice unit is not satisfactory to that level, then it may issue the qualified reports as per the format provided by the peer review board. Now, in what case the qualified report becomes necessary? So, whenever there is a weakness in the control or the engagement performances deficiency are pervasive and chronic in nature. For say earlier we discussed where the planning process has been skipped by the practice unit. So, in such a case, it becomes necessary to issue the qualified report, because when such particular process has itself has been skipped, so in that case what further clarifications you can ask, what representation you can ask from the practice unit. So in such a case where the deficiency is pervasive and chronic in nature, in that case it is necessary to issue the qualified reports. And financial statements where the practice unit do not included disclosure required by the technical, professional, and ethical standard, where any particular disclosure has been skipped by the practice unit. In also in that case, the qualified report become necessary. And whenever the qualified report has been issued, in that case, the usually the peer review certificate has not been issued, and further a period of 6 months has been given by the board to the practice unit to eliminate and to clear all the deficiency which has been found and reported by the reviewer. And after the 6 months, the peer review process has been conducted by the peer review board, and initiated by the peer review board for that particular practice unit. And in that case, whatever the assignments has been done, assurance function has been performed during the period of 6 months. For that particular period, only the peer review process has been done again within 6 months, and afterward, if the board satisfies with the report provided by the reviewer, then only the further the final peer review certificate has been issued by the board, and not before that. So in case when the qualified report has been issued, there is no issuance of the peer review certificate has been done. So, along with the final report, in the clean final report, the reviewer has to attach the list of documents which is containing the Annexure A, which contains the checklist of the documents which is submitted and compliance checklist. Again, Annexure 1, which is comprising of the 24 questions, which is usually answered by the reviewer in a yes, no, and not applicable formats only. And again, Annexure 2, it is there, which is a compliance according, which asks for the compliance according to the SQC 1. And there are 36 questions with many subpoints has been, each one of been answered elaborately whenever it is necessary, specifically where how the process has been followed and what has been done, kind of questions been asked, which has been deliberately written up by the peer reviewer, instead of just writing at a yes, no, and not applicable. Annexure 3, again, where the AQMM has been done, in that case, the Annexure 3 has been submitted by the reviewer. In that case, the AQMM has been, the self-assessment has been done by the practice unit, and against which the assessment has been done by the RE in the 3 parts, which is containing of 600 marks, which we'll later discuss very briefly after that, after the whole peer review reports. Again, the final bill of the RE along with the receipt of the payment received from the practice unit has been submitted, that yes, the fees has been duly received from the practice unit. Then have to submit the copy of the form 1, which is a questionnaire received by the reviewer from the practice unit. Then the list of samples which is selected by the RE along with the basis of selections. They have to written up that what are the basis has been considered for the selections of this sample has to be mentioned along with this list. Then form 9, it is the letter of submissions of the reports by RE to PRB, that yes, all the reports has been duly submitted by the reviewer to the peer review board along with the confirmations of the receipt of the report by the practice unit. Then the copy of the preliminary report, if any, been issued, then along with the submissions of the representations received from the practice unit. Now let us understand we have read here with the many place the word questionnaire. the questionnaire received from the Form 1, and questionnaire is to be submitted by the practice unit for initiating the whole peer review process. So what is the whole questionnaire has been framed with? So in the questionnaire, it has been again asked the details in the three parts. That is, in the part A, it asks with the form details of the practice unit with the period for which it would like to apply for the peer review, the reason for applying the peer review, whether it is mandated or it's been voluntary. Then after that, the declarations of the report signed during the peer reviewed during the period under review. Then have to mention the type of the clients, whether it's manufacturing clients, industrial clients, listed clients, banking clients. They have to define the and given the whole details of the list of the clients, type of along with that type of the clients. Then the statutory audits of the enterprise has been done by or not. Then again, specifically has been provided in the particular line item about the conducting the listed companies audit. Then options for the appointment of the reviewer has been provided in the form 1, that is ask for the from which city you would like to have the reviewer, whether it is from the same city or from any another cities. And the another details, it's for address and mail ID for the communications and sending the peer review certificates. Then the details of the assurance client and the format for the head office and all the branches separately for the period under review year wise in the prescribed format under the clause 22A2K of the part A of the questionnaire. This is a very important part of the questionnaire, which almost many of the practice unit making the mistake while preparing this part, because it's a very long processing task to prepare this whole format. Because with this format, you have to provide all the assurance details of all the assurance functions performed during the 3 years of the for which the review has been conducted. So the format is again a serial number I have to provide, the category of the client's name or code of the client has to be given, name of the branch or HO of the practice unit, name of the signing partners, type of the engagement, that is which one year it belongs. Then whether the engagement quality review has been done or not, what is the turnover of the assignments, borrowing of the in lakhs and net worth of the assignments. So with all the particular details, you have to prepare the form 1, and this is a very tactile task to prepare this format. Again, there are the serial number A2K has been provided. The total 11 categories has been provided, in which you have to bifurcate all your, apart from this column, you have to bifurcate all the assurance functions in the total 11 categories, along with the mentioning that whether the assignments has been procured with a tendering process or not. And in general category, you have to in the type of assignment engagement, you have to bifurcate it as whether it's a central statutory audit, statutory audit, tax audit, internal audit, GST audit, or other. So you have to define the type of engagement based on this 6 provided criteria. Then there is a part B of the questionnaire, which is usually asked for the general control, which is set up and followed by with respect to the standard on quality control by the practice unit, which is usually asked for the leadership and responsibility for the quality within the firms, which is again 10 questions has been asked for that leadership and responsibility things. Then ethical requirement, there are 15 points has been provided. Acceptance and continuations of the client relationship and specific engagement, that is 7 questions has been asked. Then again, the human resource management related questions, there are 10 questions has been asked. And engagement performance and monitoring, that is 20 and 6 questions has been have to provide for the answer in the part B, right? And again, the part C, which is AQMM, which is mainly divided into the 3 sections. First is the practice management operationals, second is the human resource management, and the third is the practice management or with respect to strategic and functional. In the part B, you have to answer the questions that what kind of process you are followed or not, and what are the resources has been kept for. And in the part C, there is a process of giving the points, The points has been again divided in the three parts. So we'll discuss now the AQMM, how it been observed and performed. So the quality audit quality maturity model is the concept of AQMM, that is the self evaluations of the firm. It's been newly introduced with effect from the 1st April 2023. For conducting it is mandatory for the practice unit which is conducting the statutory audit of the listed companies. Again, it is comprised of the three sections to assess the competency basis, and each is having the self assessments and prescribed marks for the same. And first of all, this whole AQMM has been filled up by the practice unit by having the self evaluations. And with respect to the same, the observations has been done by the RE, and RE will also awards the marks for the same and has to explain if there is a change in the marks that is been assessed by the practice unit and the assessed by the RE. If there is any difference, then RE has to give the reasons for that difference, right? And in some case, that might be the case that negative marking is also been awarded. It's depending on the marks obtained. The AQMM level has been decided, which is as under. So we have discussed the three parts. That first is the practice management operation, second is the human resource management, and third is the practice management and strategic relating to strategic and functional. In three cases, first part is containing the of 280 points, second is of 240 points, and third is containing for the 20 marks. That is a whole, in total it's been 600 marks. So based on the marks has been awarded by the practice unit and the RE, the percentage has been retrieved, and the based on percentage achieved by the firm, the level has been determined, and accordingly the interpretations of that firm has been done. For say, if there is a 25% level percentage in each sections, that is the level 1, 2, 3, and 4. First is up to 25%, second is a 25 to 50%, third is a up to 50% to 75%, and fourth is 75% to 100%. If the firm has achieved only the percentage up to a 25%, it will be considered as a level 1, and there is a need to immediate upgradations is required. In that case, severe deficiency has been found, and in that case, firm is required to upgrade immediately, right? In the level 2, it will be considered which is between up to which has achieved a 25% to 50%. Then firm has to be considered to some minor progress, which is fine, with which the fine tuning is required further ahead. And when the firm has achieved up to 50% to 75%, that will be fall under the level 3, and firm is considered to be considered as made substantial progress. And when the firm has achieved the percentage between 75 to 100%, it will be fall under the level 4, and it will be considered as has significant adoptions of the standards and procedures. So this is the whole concept of the AQMM, which is mandatorily be applicable to the listed entities. So this is whole about the process of the peer review process and the reporting of the peer review process. Now let us understand who can conduct the whole review process, who can be the reviewer. So the member in practices shall be eligible to enroll as a peer review, and he must be in the practices and having at least 7 years of assurance and practice experience. And whoever the member who was in employment and has subsequently obtained the certificate of practice, then he must have the at least 10 years of experience in the employment, as well as the at least 3 years of the audit experience in the practice. And now currently he must be in the whole time practice at time of the enrollment and being appointed as a peer reviewer. So the member who is not been eligible for being appointed as the reviewer of the practice unit. So if any members against whom any disciplinary actions or proceeding has been pending, and he's been found guilty of the professional misconduct or any other misconduct by the council or any board of disciplinary committee, then or the person has been convicted by the competent court within or outside India, or of the any offense involve moral turpitude and has been punishable with the imprisonment, then in that case, the reviewer is not been eligible to be act as a reviewer. Next, the peer reviewer shall not accept eligible peer reviewer we are talking about, the peer reviewer shall not accept any professional assignments from the practice unit within the period of 2 years from the date of appointment and the 2 years prior to the date of appointments, both after the date of appointment and prior to the date of appointment, should not have accept any professional assignments from the practice unit or any of the partners of the practice unit in case of it is a firm. The reviewer shall be de-empanelment if his name has been removed from the register of the member or he has surrendered his COP, that is certificate of practice. And the reviewer shall require to furnish the declarations of confidentiality that we have considered in the process of the peer review in the form 2 while giving the consent to be appointed as a peer reviewer, in which he is filing that confidential declaration of confidentiality that whatever information has been provided of the practice unit has been kept confidential by the reviewer. So what are the obligations of the peer reviewer? Once he has been appointed as a peer reviewer, what are the obligations on the part of the peer reviewer? So reviewer shall comply with the provisions of the peer review guidelines that is provided earlier we have discussed in the first part. In case of any non-compliance of the board is empowered to initiate any appropriate actions as per the law. And reviewer shall not be eligible to take any extract of the practice unit's clients' files or records which is made available to them while conducting the peer review. In the case of peer review, while you are going to make the on-site review, the practice unit going to present all the extracts and all the documents pertaining to that clients of that practice unit to the reviewer for the review. So in that case, reviewer is not been supposed to take any extract of any such informations. And reviewer shall complete the review within the prescribed time frame unless it is extended by the in concurrence with the practice unit. And peer reviewer shall submit the peer review report to the board within the time allowed. The reviewer shall document all his working papers and submit the copy of his working papers to the board if it is been directed by the board within the period of 18 months from the submissions of the peer review. Peer review have to keep all the working papers for his record. That is containing usually the form cards of the practice unit, all the details of the practice unit, and all the listed documents which is required to be kept by the reviewer. And it is to be preserved for 18 months from the date of submissions of the report. Peer reviewer can appoint an assistant for conduct the peer review, but however, the assistant should be the chartered accountant in practice. And reviewer seeks the assistance of whenever the reviewer is taking the assistance of that qualified assistance. Qualified assistance is also under all the obligations as applicable to that of the peer reviewer. Now let us understand the confidentiality concepts for this peer review, which is very important. There is a strict confidentiality should be maintained by all those involved in the peer review process, which is namely reviewer or any member of the board, or including the peer review secretary or any qualified assistants and the practice unit. This whole concept of confidentiality is governed by the secrecy provisions and all times preserve and aid in preserving the secrecy with regard to any matter arising in the performance or in assisting in performance of any functions directly or indirectly which is related to the process and the conduct of the peer review. And reviewer shall not make any use or any of the disclose of the content of the peer review report or any confidential informations about the process of the review except which is required by the board or council, and non-compliance of which is amount to the professional misconduct as defined under the section 22 of the Chartered Accountant Act 1949. Now the last concept is the revocations of the review certificate, and there are the certain case has been provided under which the revocations of the peer review certificates has been done by the peer review board. The board may, subject to the principle of natural justice of being heard, revoke the peer review certificates of the practice unit during its currency if the practice unit has not complied with the order or advisory issued by the peer review board, the peer review board has received any directions or from the secretary of ICR or disciplinary director or any other regulator through the secretary or ICR or the council, the practice unit or any of its partners are held guilty by the disciplinary committee or the court within the 1 month from the final order issued by the disciplinary committee or the court, as the case may be. And normally in the case, these all are the obligatory cases. And fourth one is the if there is a change in the one half or more of the partner of the firm. If there is a change in the formation partnership, change in the partners of the partnership firms, in that case the certificate has been revoked upon the expiry of the 6 months from the date of such change or the shorter period. If the period of expiry and the change is a short period of change and the validity of the certificate has been shorter than 6 period, in that case the shorter period is been considered during the last 6 months, and the certificate has been revoked, right? So these are the points under which the revocations of the peer review certificates has been done. So these all are the concepts from my side regarding the rational significance and whole process of the peer review and all the relevant parameters regarding the peer review process. So if there is any question and answer, then we can discuss further ahead.
There is people are asking for PPT.
Okay, we'll share with the committee and then you can circulate it to the members.
Okay.
Is there any further questions?
There are no major questions. One question, I think it's relating to earlier session, which is what key areas to note for valuation? Anything relating to this? Okay. So those all questions were there. So I would like to conclude with thanks to a wonderful speaker, CA Hetal Devani ma'am, for uprising.
Thank you, ma'am.
And also my gratitude all for taking time to join this session and making it successful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
So, yes, that's it from my end. Hope to see everyone soon.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.